Teaching Tolerance is a project of the Southern Poverty Law Center. It was started nearly 25 years ago by Morris Dees, who is one of the co-founders of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Morris had encountered lots of perpetrators of violence in the courtroom, and these were often associated with hate groups. And what he was finding was that even though he had successful cases, lawsuits often against these perpetrators and the groups that had inspired them, if inspired is the right word, he said, you know, I'm going into courtrooms and I'm seeing 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds who are so imbued with hate that it had to start out very, very young. And so why don't we match the work we do in classrooms, in courtrooms with work in the classroom? Let's start a program that in fact reduces prejudice. So Teaching Tolerance started out in 1991 as a program to reduce prejudice, but think about where we were in 1991. What we did not know at the time, well, first of all, we had, it's 1990, about 40 years of continuous school integration. Fits and starts, but schools were integrating, and that meant that previously all white schools were becoming more diverse. What we did not know is that school integration peaked in 1989, and we've in fact seen schools become more segregated since then. But the original purpose of the program was to reduce prejudice among white students, basically, to prevent the formation of neo-Nazis or new Klan members or white supremacists, essentially. And for many, many years, we operated on a prejudice reduction program based on contact theory, which basically says if different people have contact with each other, have open communication, and are working on some kind of common goal, that prejudice will be reduced. But think about what you need. You need, first of all, to have an integrated space where people actually do come into contact with each other. That is not happening as much in American schools now. And the other problem with that kind of contact theory is that it mainly works for dominant groups. Dominant groups benefit from prejudice reduction. Dominant groups might be, for instance, based on religion. You know, if you are in a majority Christian community and you have a handful of Jewish students, then it's the Christians who have to kind of open up the tent and let others in. If it's a white majority, same kind of thing. You're a dominant group and you need to break down kind of identity barriers, open up the tent, let others in. What we've learned is that contact theory is not particularly effective for non-dominant groups. And the example I often use is that you would not ask an 11-year-old victim of anti-gay bullying to take the perspective of his tormentor. You know, it does not work. What social science has shown us, in fact, is that non-dominant groups really need some sense of solidarity. They need to recognize what happens to them because of their position in non-dominant groups, and they need the tools to effect change. We think of it as collective action. But we also have lots of tools for teachers that emphasize positive racial identity, positive ethnic identity, and student activism. We want students to take informed action, and that doesn't necessarily mean storming the barricades, you know, with 16-year-olds. Anything that helps them learn how to work together collectively and do something is going to essentially increase their sense of agency and their sense of self-efficacy. The other is that we have a curriculum called Perspectives for Diverse America. And this is a planning tool that teachers have to build learning plans. They're literacy-based learning plans, so it's not something extra that you are putting into your curriculum. You're teaching what you need to teach anyway, which is literacy and reading. The curriculum is built around what we call central texts, and those central texts are literary texts, informational texts, visual text, and multimedia text. But when you build a learning plan, the first thing you do after choosing a text is choosing what students will do once they've read the text. And one of those things is a writing exercise, and the other is called Do Something. And we have literally dozens of possible do something tasks from kindergarten to grade 12. that are basically practice of the kinds of skills that we're talking about that students will need to do. So it's working with others, it's exploring and learning about a problem. So in social studies speak, it's taking informed action. And then it is actually doing something. And we do it in, taking kids from kindergarten to grade 12 in kind of ever-expanding spheres of influence. So we don't really expect kindergartners necessarily to do a major community project. But at grade 12, perhaps they will, or perhaps they'll do a tweet for change. And one of the do somethings is called Tweet for Change, and it's about how to have a Twitter campaign. So there are lots and lots of ways to do it, but one of, inspiring examples is one way, and giving students the opportunity to practice doing something is another way. And I think that they're both equally important. We have so much material for teachers that all we ask them to do is go to one of our 2 websites. The Perspectives for a Diverse America tool is on a separate site, and it's perspectives.tolerance.org. And then the main tolerance site is tolerance.org. There are over 400 lesson plans on tolerance.org, and that's a good place to start. That's also where you go to order the films. That's also where you go to pick up some of our publications like Speak Up at School, Let's Talk, or Responding to Hate and Bias at School. The site is fully searchable, so you can search by grade level, you can search by subject area, you could search by the particular problem that you're interested in. You mentioned earlier a story about a little red-haired girl with curly hair in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan who became a social justice activist because she was teased about her appearance. You could search on hair in our website and find, in fact, lessons exactly targeted to that situation, because that's actually one of the more common reasons that young children get teased and bullied, is because of physical differences, curly hair, straight hair, kinky hair, whatever, particularly if they're, if you have one African-American child in a class, or you have one redheaded child in the class or something like that. So there's a wealth of materials